It started like any ordinary Tuesday morning. I had just finished my coffee and was about to head out for work when I heard what sounded like a wild animal on my front porch peering through the peephole. I couldn't believe my eyes. There was Barbara Wilson, or Karen as the entire neighborhood secretly called her, literally tearing my welcome mat to shreds with her bare hands. "This is not HOA approved," she screamed, her face contorted with rage as she ripped the fabric apart. "I've warned you 3 times." I flung the door open, completely stunned. "What are you doing?" Barbara whipped around to face me, her perfectly highlighted bob swinging fistfuls of my shredded home. Sweet home mat clutched in her manicured hands. Her eyes were wild, like she was possessed by the spirit of 1,000 complaint forms. "Enforcing the rules you agreed to when you moved in," she snarled, spittle flying from her lips. Just then I heard my neighbor Mark yell from across the street. I called the cops. Barbara's head snapped in his direction, her mouth forming a perfect O of indignation. My wife and I had moved into Oakwood Estates just 3 months ago. It was our first home after years of saving, and we were thrilled to have found such a beautiful place in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The house needed some work, but we were excited about making it our own, adding little personal touches to make it feel like home. One of those touches was a colorful welcome mat that my mother had given us as a housewarming gift, a simple design with "Home Sweet Home" embroidered on a navy background with bright yellow sunflowers. We knew the neighborhood had an HOA, but we didn't think much of it until the third day after moving in. That's when Barbara first appeared on our doorstep, clipboard in hand, and a tight, forced smile plastered on her face. She introduced herself as the president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association and said she was there for a friendly chat about our design choices. "Your welcome mat doesn't match our neighborhood aesthetic," she explained, her tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "The approved palette for exterior decorative items is listed in Section 4, Paragraph 6 of the bylaws." She handed me a highlighted printout. "You might want to replace it within the week." I tried to be reasonable and said we'd review the bylaws, but I didn't see how a welcome mat could possibly be that serious. My wife, trying to make peace, mentioned we'd already replaced our mailbox to match the approved style and planted only the flowers on the approved vegetation list. Barbara's smile tightened further, and she said she appreciated our compliance in other areas. The following weeks became a bizarre game of cat and mouse, no matter what we did to follow the HOA rules, and there were many. Barbara kept coming back to the welcome mat issue first. It was a formal notice about the mat's excessive lettering. Then came another about its unapproved colors, posing a visual disruption. The third notice claimed the mat was a potential tripping hazard due to its half in thickness. I started talking to other neighbors when Barbara wasn't around and discovered we weren't alone. She had cited the Johnsons for wind chimes that were 2 inches longer than regulation. The elderly Mr. Peterson had received weekly notices about his grass being 1/8 of an inch too tall, and poor Mrs. Diaz had been fined $300 for having a bird feeder visible from the street. Apparently it attracted non-aesthetic wildlife. "Why doesn't anyone stand up to her?" I asked Dave, who lived 2 doors down. "You don't understand," he whispered, glancing around, as if Barbara might be hiding in the bushes. "She's been HOA president for 7 years. Her husband's on the town council. She has connections at the county permit office. Cross her, and suddenly your renovation permits get denied, or you're facing fines for code violations nobody else gets cited for." Despite all this, I decided to keep the mat. It wasn't just about the principle anymore. It was a gift from my mother, who was battling cancer. Every time I saw those sunflowers, I thought of her strength and positivity. I tried reasoning with Barbara one evening when I saw her measuring the height of someone's decorative shrubs with a ruler. "It's just a welcome mat," I said calmly. "It's not hurting anyone. My mother gave it to us, and she's not well. It means a lot to us." Barbara straightened up, smoothed her crisp khaki pants, and looked at me like I'd suggested painting the house neon pink. "Rules are rules," she said coldly. "No exceptions, not even for sick mothers." That was the last straw. I decided to look into the HOA bylaws myself and discovered something interesting. The rule about welcomets only specified that they must be in good condition and not present tripping hazards. There was nothing about colors or designs. When I pointed this out in an email to Barbara, copying the entire HOA board, Her response was a new amendment to the rules that had mysteriously been approved the day before, specifying acceptable mat designs. It all came to a head that Tuesday morning, I had installed a Ring doorbell camera the weekend before, HOA approved of course, after filling out a 17-page application. The camera caught everything. Barbara marching up to my porch at 7:15 in the morning, face already flushed with anger, muttering about these people who just don't get it. Then came the moment when she bent down, yanked the mat off the ground, and began tearing it apart while screaming about rule violations when I confronted her. And my neighbor called the police. Barbara didn't back down. Instead, she stepped closer, jabbing a finger in my chest. "I am the head of the HOA Visual Standards Committee," she hissed. "I have been maintaining property values in this neighborhood since before you could afford a doghouse here. Your little mat is bringing down the entire street's curb. Appeal, get off my property," I said firmly. "You're trespassing, and you've destroyed my personal property." "Trespassing?" She laughed, a shrill sound that made my skin crawl. "I have the authority to inspect any part of this neighborhood at any time." By then, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, watching the spectacle. Barbara noticed them and seemed to puff up even more. As if performing for an audience, she started listing all the violations she documented in the neighborhood, calling out specific neighbors, and you. "Linda, don't think I haven't noticed your unauthorized bird bath that evening. I uploaded the Ring footage to our neighborhood's online forum. I hadn't planned for it to go viral, but by morning it had thousands of views and hundreds of comments. Neighbors I'd never even met started sharing their own Barbara stories. Someone sent footage of her measuring their holiday lights with a tape measure at 5 in the morning. Another had caught her peering through their windows with binoculars from across the street. The most damning evidence came from retired Judge Morris at the end of the block, who shared security footage of Barbara entering his backyard and taking photos while he was on vacation. Clear trespassing. "I've been documenting her behavior for years," he wrote, just waiting for someone else to speak up first. When the police arrived at my house to take my statement, Barbara was still there now, demanding to see their badges and threatening to call the chief of police, whom she claimed was a personal friend. The officer, a calm, middle-aged woman named Sergeant Martinez, listened patiently before saying, "Ma'am, regardless of your position in the HOA, you cannot destroy other people's property or enter their land without permission. I was enforcing community regulations." Barbara insisted, her voice rising. "The HOA isn't a law enforcement agency," Sergeant Martinez explained, "and your bylaws don't override state law. You're not above the law." Ms. Wilson, Barbara's face went through an impressive range of expressions: shock, outrage, disbelief, and finally fear. As Sergeant Martinez informed her she was being arrested for criminal trespass and vandalism as they led her to the police car, Barbara kept shouting about decorative anarchy and how the neighborhood was falling apart at the seams. "You'll all be sorry when your property values plummet," she yelled as she was guided into the back seat. "You think this is a game? This is our community standards." The following week, the HOA board called an emergency meeting for the first time in years. Nearly every homeowner attended. Barbara, who had been released on bail, wasn't present. After reviewing the evidence and hearing from multiple homeowners, the board unanimously voted to remove Barbara from her position as president and from the board entirely. But the real shock came when the board's treasurer, a quiet accountant named Paul, presented his findings from a forensic audit he'd conducted over the past 3 years. He explained, "Approximately $22,000 in HOA fines were collected, but never deposited in our accounts." All eyes turned to the empty chair where Barbara would normally sit. 2 days later, Barbara was charged with embezzlement. In addition to the vandalism and trespassing charges, the district attorney, citing the overwhelming evidence and multiple complaints, pursued the case aggressively. In the end, Barbara accepted a plea deal: 6 months in jail, 3 years probation, and restitution of all stolen funds, plus a $10,000 fine when the sentence was announced in court. Barbara's perfectly maintained facade finally cracked completely. "This is absurd," she shrieked as her lawyer tried to calm her. "I was protecting our community. Do you know what this will do to my reputation?" The judge, unmoved, added a stern lecture about abuse of power and betrayal of community trust, which only made Barbara sob harder as she was led away, still protesting that we would all regret this when our property values collapsed.